Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you kindly to everyone out there for listening and watching, for following and subscribing. You guys are the best, and I appreciate y'all very, very much. Before we get into today's episode, and I got a special guest today, first time doing the podcast with me since we've been doing, at least anyway, on the video side. I'll get into that in just a second. Want to remind you guys, if you're in the area, Thursday, basically for most of you listening, tomorrow, Thursday, September 12th, 4:30 p.m., Imperial Pizza, 1035 Abbott Road, Logan's Friendship Bracelet event. Quick reminder, Logan's the kid who sent Keon Coleman a letter after he was drafted and sent him a friendship bracelet, which Keon wore. The family has decided to do something really good with that, and they are selling these bracelets at this event, $8. Every penny from these being sold is going directly to Oshai's Children's Hospital, and they got some amazing stuff that's going to be raffled off as well. A Keon Coleman jersey, Keon Coleman football, Joe Andreessen football, Josh Allen stuff, all kinds of stuff. Teron Johnson, you name it. Bunch of stuff. And again, every single penny from that is going to Oshai's Children's Hospital. So again, that is Thursday, 4:30 p.m., 1035 Abbott Road, Imperial Pizza. As for today's show, man, I am excited. I have the editor-in-chief right now of Buffalo Rumblings, my man, Matt Warren. What's going on, dude? How you doing?
Hey, Pat. I'm doing okay. I'm actually not the editor-in-chief of Buffalo Rumblings anymore. I got a promotion 2 years ago. So I'm actually the associate director of NFL for SB Nation. So Matt Byam is in charge of Buffalo Rumblings right now. I kind of help them out with salary cap stuff and some articles here and there, but it's their show now. I'm more of the overseer kind of guy.
You're the lead guy now. That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
That is really awesome, man. You've you've been at this for a while. I mean, going all the way back to kind of like, when did you first get on Twitter? Because I got on Twitter right around 2008, 2009, which is, from what I remember, kind of when you first, at least from my recollection anyway, when you first kind of came on the sports scene at Rumbling. You go all the way back to like 2009 there, don't you?
Right. Yeah. It was the Bryant Johnson sweepstakes was when I joined up with Buffalo Rumblings. If you remember that, there was a big to-do about whether he was going to sign in Buffalo or not. And he ended up, I think, with a 1-year deal in Detroit, and the Bills were like, fine, we don't do 1-year deals. And that was like the end of that. But that's kind of when I started at Buffalo Rumblings. I started writing for them just a little bit here and there, doing Hall of Fame pieces, like trying to make the case for Steve Tasker, Andre Reed, Ralph Wilson for the Hall of Fame. And then joined the staff there, worked my way up. When Twitter started, to answer your original question, I joined Twitter mainly to do training camp updates. I lived a few miles from St. John Fisher. Yeah. And so when little baby Twitter was kind of coming along, you could embed it right into articles. And so I would go to training camp and live tweet before live tweeting was even really a thing. And just take notes and do all that other stuff. It kind of exploded pretty quickly there. I've leveled off since then because I'd like to think I'm funny on Twitter, but I don't necessarily provide a ton of analysis on Twitter because most of the stuff I do is longer in context. It's more nuanced. And so I would tend to put it on Buffalo Rumblings. And plus I'm not really breaking any news. So that was most of the stuff on Twitter.
Twitter has come a long way from the way we used to tweet about and cover football since back in those days, 2009. I've been a fan of Buffalo Rumblings for a very long time, and I've always had a really good relationship with the people at Rumblings, yourself, Brian Gallagher, when he was running things. And there's a lot of talent that has come through Rumblings, whether it's the blogging side, whether it was on the podcasting side, people that I've become through the years very fond of and developed good relationships with them too. Have them on the podcast all the time. Of course, Bruce Nolan, still to this day, one of I joke with him all the time. I take 16% credit for discovering him, so to speak. He wasn't complete obscurity because he ended up going to Rumley's with you guys. But first time I ever heard him on a podcast, I'm like, there's something different about this guy. And it was at the time the Nick and Nolan show, and they're both
Right.
good, but Bruce just stood out. And man, I remember those days so fondly. I still talk obviously to Bruce all the time. Joe, another one who came through Rumblings on the podcasting side. Anthony Marino, one of my favorite people in this world. He's still a regular on this podcast. Of course, he's an OG originally from Buffalo Rumblings as well. But there's been a lot of good talent present and also in the past that have come through your doors at Buffalo Rumblings.
Yeah, Anthony's actually the one that brought Bruce to my attention too. And like I heard his voice the first time and like just some of the stuff he says, and it's just kind of in my wheelhouse. He and I tend to agree more often than not, Bruce and I. And so that's why I try to stay away from whatever his lanes are, because I'm kind of redundant when he's talking. One other person you didn't mention was Chris Trapasso, who came through Buffalo Rumblings for a couple years. And now he's hosting One Bills Live as a guest host and like writing for CBS Sports and like one of the names we like to talk about. But yeah, I mean, we tried to do things right from the very beginning. You know, Brian, when he founded the site, he had a journalism degree at from SUNY Geneseo. So we've always tried to like do that while also playing kind of like the fan card of it side. And so I think we can exist in a lot of different worlds and serve a lot of different people in that way, whether it's, in the comments section that not every site has, obviously, our heavily moderated comments section, which, can kind of keep out like the old message board kind of toxicity.
Sure.
Whether it's the social media stuff, for a long time, it was the podcast network. Obviously that's not there anymore, but still just great coverage on the site. I think they can cater to pretty much every Bills fan that's out there. I don't expect every Bills fan to read every article at BuffaloRumblings.com, but I think there's something there for every Bills fan.
I remember, and again, going back years, lots of people do it now, but you guys were among the first, if not the first, the Daily Links. I used to go there every morning, and you could kind of pick and choose there. You would have a link from a bunch of relevant articles at the time. It was really cool. I forgot about Chris, by the way. Shame on me. Funny, I just had him at Imperial. We did a live show before the draft, and funny quick story. I've probably done 35, 40 shows there with other guests at Imperial, and I've never had an issue, a tech issue ever. So Chris comes there, and I set up everything before he gets there. And I have I pretty much have a duplicate set of everything now. I got a duplicate camera, mixer, lights, you name it. So I don't have to take everything down from my studio and reset it up and bring it back down again. So anyway, we go to Imperial, and I even have a backup charger for my laptop. So I bring my laptops to one piece of equipment that I got to bring both places. Anyway, I set everything up. I plug in the dummy battery, the computer's on, the camera's on. We sit down, we have some wings. We're getting ready to do the show like 3 minutes before we were supposed to start, or actually we were going live. The dummy battery that I bought for the laptop did not work, and the laptop was literally dead. So I didn't have a laptop. I had to drive all the way back home to West Seneca, get the real battery charger, come back to Imperial, plug it in. We ended up like 45, 50 minutes late than what we were supposed to be. But Chris was awesome, and it ended up being a really great show. But that's my of all the stories I could say about Chris Trapasso, that's the one that I remember most about him. Good dude, man.
Nice.
Smart guy too.
I did want to go back to your links post because like I'm a big kind of like journalism guy type. I'd like to defend journalism as much as I possibly can. I did that for years. I would wake up before my family was up, before I went to work. I would read 20 articles every morning. Great writers, great opinion pieces, national stuff, local stuff, to curate that every day. And I learned so much in that process. Like I would not be here today if I didn't curate those links posts for years over at Buffalo Rumblings and just read how to be a good writer. It's that like old Malcolm Gladwell, like, you need a certain number of hours to get good at stuff. And like, I just observed so many great writers, not to say I'm a great writer, but like I got so much better by reading all of those people doing those links posts.
100%. And before we dive in here, quick little confession too. So our relationship goes back, I've been doing this podcast since 2018, but our relationship goes way farther back. I had
Buffalo Sports Daily. Are we
yeah.
talking?
So here's I'll give you a confession here real quick. I kind of stole your idea. The daily links. I was doing the same thing after you guys did. I was like, this is great. I'm going to need to do the same thing. Now, the one thing is you guys are, Rumblings is all football, whereas I would have a lot of hockey and other general Buffalo, other sports links. But yeah, that concept that I got, I lifted that from Buffalo Rumblings, and I would be doing daily links every day.
Yeah, that's an SB Nation staple going all the way back. Just like, trying to be one-stop shops for folks. Like, I talk about how Buffalo Rumblings has something for every Bills fan, and those links often had something for every Bills fan. So it was just a great way to like start your day. Like you would go in there, like maybe there's 10 articles in there and you only click through and read one or two of them, but it was just a great way to kind of like get a sense of what was going on, especially like during the drought. I mean, you could always find negative articles, but could you always sometimes you could find positives or like glimmers of hope in some of those links posts.
Sure. Yeah, man. And I'll tell you what, for at least on the written end of it, obviously not the podcast anymore, but on the written end of it, Rumley still could be a nice little one-stop shop for Bills fans to go get all their stuff. Some actual Bills news I want to spend a handful of minutes with Matt today, kind of taking one last look because this is a short week, so we got to move forward quickly, but take a last look. I want to find out, some of the things that you liked and disliked most from Buffalo in week one. And then I kind of want to take a little peek at Miami, get going with a little bit of a preview, at least anyway, for that game. But some actual news to come out. We're recording this Tuesday morning, so this might become more clear throughout the day into tomorrow by the time most of you are watching or listening to this show. But Spencer Brown's contract details have finally emerged. 4 years, $72 million, so $18 million average salary a year. That's confirmed on multiple outlets. That's not really being disputed anywhere as we record this, which, by the way, I think that makes him the 8th highest paid right now, right tackle in the league as things stand. There was an original, so on Over the Cap, you and I were talking, and guaranteed money was just under $20 million. Right before we started recording the show today, Ian Rappaport just reported that the guaranteed money was $45 million. Obviously, that is a big difference. I wanted to get your take on the contract, the deal, what you think about it. Is it a move that you agree with, locking a guy up like that for 4 years? And how much does that discrepancy in guaranteed money, how much is that going to change your opinion, if at all?
Right. Well, let's talk about the guaranteed money first. As you said, like most of the reports say it's around $20 million of fully guaranteed money, which would include the signing bonus, his 2024 salary, and then most of his 2025 compensation is what I'm seeing at Over the Cap and Spot Track. But he's got a $16 million option bonus in 2025. So and I know this is getting in the weeds a little bit on audio, but like, if he's got a $16 million option bonus, but only 12 of that is guaranteed, it's practically guaranteed. So you can say that whole 16 million and his 3 million salary next year is fully guaranteed, or is practically guaranteed. I can't say fully guaranteed. And so that's, 19 million plus 6 million is now you're up to 25 million plus. So that's 25 million in practical guarantees, or actually it's 26 because I forgot to include his base salary for this year. So that's practical guarantees. And then he's got the guaranteed for injuries, which the reporters and the agents all love to include as part of that guaranteed money. And so if he gets injured and can never play another football game ever in his life, there's another 12.5 million in injury guarantees. And so like that starts to add up close to 40 million. So I don't know, like there's always nuance in some of that stuff. So, for all intents and purposes, it's a 2-year deal. With injury guarantees beyond that. So I don't know if we necessarily have to worry about that, but over the course of the next 2 seasons, he's going to make, like I said, I'm doing quick math here. It just came out, like 27.5 million over the next 2 seasons. And then we'll see at $15 million a year after that. They added void years on there to spread out the cap hit. So there'll be some dead cap that goes into that. I'm sure that option bonus is going to be kicked out over multiple years next year. So I'll have a full breakdown at Buffalo Rumblings probably by the time this podcast is posted. So folks can go over there and check it out. But I mean, I knew it was going to be high. I thought he was going to be top 10. Top 8 is very, very good for him. I wrote an article for SB Nation earlier this week about the Cowboys because they waited so long to extend CeeDee Lamb. They waited so long to extend Dak Prescott. They're waiting so long to extend Micah Parsons. It's going to end up costing them, $4 million a year, which over the course of the life of those contracts is, $16 million each for both Lamb and Prescott probably. And so like delaying only drives the price up over the course of the year. But as you can see, sometimes if you extend maybe a year too early, you end up in maybe a Tyler Bass situation where you're kind of locked into a player.
Dawson Knox.
Right. That's another one. They were able to renegotiate that Knox deal, thankfully, to get a little bit of cash back in their pocket. But that was the great point, was the Dawson Knox one. So, you're taking a risk on a player like really going forward. Like he's had one really good season and one hopefully good off season, but like it really is. I mean, a leap of faith is probably too strong of a phrase for it, but it's, you're putting yourself out there a little bit for a guy like Spencer Brown, who's only had really one good NFL season and fought through a bunch of injuries and inexperience before that. So yeah, it's that step of faith, not necessarily a leap of faith.
I mean, I get it on one hand for sure. You just locked up. You got both your right tackles here, or both your offensive tackles. I'm sorry, for years to come. With your quarterback, who's still very much in his prime. That makes a lot of sense. I do get concerned. I think about a Tyler Bass and I think about a Dawson Knox, and you're right. Spencer Brown's track record is not lengthy of being a really good player. You're kind of taking a chance. I mean, I look at it this way too. If let's just say he plays good again this year, let's say he's the exact same player this season that he was last season, and you didn't extend him, and he gets to the market. How much more money realistically is a right tackle going to get than what they paid him already? Was he getting another million or two? You just talked about it though with Dallas. It costing him $4 million a year. Is that a potential type of scenario with Spencer Brown, where if he's every bit as good this year as he was last year, 2 straight years, a solid right tackle, what's he going to get, 21, 22? Or is it about more guaranteed money? I don't know. I'm not criticizing the deal. Again, I understand the logic of it 100%. It's a little bit more than what I expected. A little bit.
It was more. It was more than I expected too. But then you look down the list and like there's this huge clump of folks from like 16.5 to 19. And so like he's right in the middle of a whole bunch of other right tackles that signed that second deal. If he makes it to free agency, he probably is signing something more than 20 million per year, just based on like looking around the NFL. I mean, there's Penei Sewell, who's like way up in the stratosphere at 28 million, and then everybody else is at 20.2 million or below. But there's that, like I said, that big chunk of folks that are like 26, 27 years old that are making around 18 million. So I mean, if you take like the little dots, like you put all the dots of the contracts on there, he's like right in the middle of that second tier behind Penei Sewell. So I think it's a fair deal at this point in time. I remember earlier this offseason, I said he's definitely going to make more than 12 million, which at that time was going to put him in the top 10. But then all these other deals came through. And so like, I still thought he was going to be in the top 10 somewhere. So if you're going like the top 10 is all making 17.5 million or more. And so that's top 10 money. So there you go.
Well, let's put it this way. Here's a good thing to take away from this. Besides, again, being happy that Josh Allen has another offensive lineman tied up for the long term. That's good. They might need that money, every penny they can get him out of the way, because I feel like the full attention is going to eventually have to turn to Greg Rousseau. And what a good segue, because if he looks anything like he did on Sunday throughout most of this season, his cost is going to go through the roof. And we might be sitting here a year from now, Matt, saying, God, I wish they would have got something done with Greg Rousseau when they did Spencer Brown, because the price of poker for him may go way up by the end of this year if he looks anything like he did this past week. So let's go here. Not counting Josh Allen, not counting Greg Rousseau. Those guys were the stars of the game, as they should be. They're the best players on each side of the ball, respectively. Not counting them, what are a couple things looking back from Sunday's victory over Arizona to start the season 1-0? What are a couple things that stood out to you most that you liked, that you came away impressed with, whether it's a player, positional thing, whatever? way you want to go with it.
Right. Well, I'm going to, swerve, right? Okay. So I wanted to give props to Mother Nature for kicking up some wind and really taking Kyler Murray out of the game a little bit in the second half. They were trying to figure it out both on the kicking game with the Cardinals and the Bills. Obviously, we saw it with Tyler Bass and that long kickoff return for the touchdown. But, Mother Nature really impacted that game, I think, more than the Bills defense did at points. And so, like, you would see, Murray either sail a pass or throw it short when he was throwing it into the wind. And I think that made a big difference in the second half. Like we might talk about defensive adjustments, like, the Bills defense like really adjusted well in the second half. But I think a lot of it was the wind. And we could see that on some of those, passes down the field. They certainly did play better on defense in the second half. And so that adjustment was, obviously key for them. They looked like they were on roller skates for those first three possessions. I think the Bills were lucky that Arizona didn't go for it on fourth down deep in Buffalo territory, because it just felt like they couldn't get two stops in a row to get Arizona off the field. And so while they did make some adjustments, go to that kind of dime look a little bit more than probably they wanted to because of the injury to Taron Johnson, I was most impressed with Mother Nature. I know that's a weird answer, but if we're taking Josh Allen and Greg Rousseau off the table, like that was, I think, the biggest key for the Bills over the course of the game.
That's a good point. I haven't heard that point before, but actually, as you're saying, I'm like, actually makes a lot of sense. And here I am ready to give Bobby Babbitt a lot of credit because he did dial up more pressure in the second half. I think for the game, they blitzed like 40% of the time, which didn't seem like they did early on, because to your point, it did. That's a great way to say it. They looked like they were on roller skates on defense those first three drives. I mean, the Cardinals were just literally doing what they wanted.
They did blitz more than they normally do, or at least traditionally. Obviously, we don't know what Bobby Babbitt, what he brings to the sauce in that little defensive kitchen, right? So they blitz more than like a Sean McDermott team normally does. At least anecdotally, I don't really know those numbers, but it like felt like they brought more of like the cornerbacks and some of that other stuff. And they did get more pressure up the middle in the second half. It felt like, whether it was Daquan Jones pushing it a little bit in the front. Obviously, we saw Greg Rousseau do a little bit better in the second half as well. It felt, I don't know, it felt different in the second half, stopping the Cardinals, stopping the Cardinals on offense.
It's a great point. So there's three things for me, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but three players or things for me that really feel promising with this team right now. One, I talked about him on the show a lot yesterday, so I'm not going to get all into it again, but Cam Lewis, I thought, played a really good game. I thought he stepped up really well when Johnson went down 4 minutes into the game. I was a little concerned. Johnson's already kind of undersized to be playing that third linebacker as it is. Cam Lewis is even smaller. But when you go back, you watch the film, this guy was really active, man. He made like 4 or 5 stops within the first 3 yards of the line of scrimmage. I thought he played a really good game. Not something I expected to be talking about before this game, but he did. I thought James Cook played well. Looked decisive when necessary, and then he looked patient. At other times, he didn't drop a pass. He didn't seem to go down a lot on first contact. He was willing to make contact. There's been a lot of talk, especially from people like me, who have been saying it's just a matter of time before Ray Davis comes in, and that ends up becoming a platoon. James Cook's game on Sunday showed you, like, maybe not so fast. I'm still the guy here. I thought he had a good game. And then, I mean, the sack wasn't the biggest deal because it was almost kind of more of a trip, but I liked Von Miller's game. I thought he looked lively. He had some juice. He had a couple nice bull rushes, a couple moves. You could see the bend in him. All the things that you saw none of last year.
Right.
That was back with Von Miller. And again, you cannot look, teams are going to figure it out. Greg Rousseau is a beast. If you don't think, Arizona might have screwed up, but if you don't think Miami and these other teams are going to start double teaming him, chipping him off the line and stuff, other guys are going to have to step up. And Von Miller looking like he's ready to do some of that, to me, was pretty promising.
Yeah, I would definitely agree on the Von Miller stuff. He didn't have he's not going to be like the old Von Miller. I think like folks need to get that out of their mind, but he was a lot closer to 2022 Von Miller than he was to 2023 Von Miller in this game. And, I thought it was nice that he got rewarded with that kind of cleanup sack. Like he got on the stat sheet. Like that was nice.
It meant a lot to him too. That it meant something to him to finally get on the board. He literally did not have an sack the entire season last year when he played. All right, let's flip the field now. Okay, what are leaving this game going into week 2 here tomorrow night in Miami? What are one thing or maybe a couple things like your biggest concerns following the Bills after this game?
Well, I mean, obviously with Taron Johnson already ruled out for the Thursday night game, like it feels like it's going to be a boat race, man. Like it just feels like I don't care what the over is. Like I think we should just take it right now. Like, so it's just the defense as a whole I'm worried about. Like you said about Cam Lewis, like if folks are going to be scheming up against Dorian Williams and Cam Lewis now, there's going to be space there for a good offensive coordinator and a good quarterback to make stuff happen. And so I'm very worried about, the safeties. I'm worried about the defense as a whole. I mean, mainly the back seven, not, the front four, I think is going to be fine. There's too many really good players on that front four for me to think that that's going to be like a sustained problem. I think they were really trying to keep Kyler Murray contained, as we I think saw during multiple points in the game. They weren't really going for the sack. They were going to keep him in the pocket like they've done with Lamar Jackson in the past. And so I think they're going to be able to pin their ears back and go after Tua a little bit more, get that AJ Epinesa, smash into Tua and knock him over type of deal. And I know we'll get to that a little bit later, but that's my biggest concern is the pass defense, the back seven of this defense as a whole, is concerning. And I don't think I'm alone in that. When you lose 2 All-Pros, like you had said already, in Matt Milano and Taron Johnson, there's going to be a significant drop-off in these cases.
It's crazy too. You go less than a month ago where you and I are having this conversation and we're previewing the Bills defense right now. And you're like, a lot of the perception is you lose Poyer, you lose Hyde, you lose Trey White. I love Trey White, but man, oh man, a pretty brutal game for him week 1.
Yeah.
But you lose those guys, you're like, oh man, this defense is going to be in a lot of trouble. I'm like, well, you get Matt Milano back. You got an all-pro in Taron Johnson. Bernard's healthy. Douglas is healthy. They weren't at the end of the last season in that loss to the Chiefs in the playoffs. Well, guess what, man? We're going into week 2 in Miami. Matt Milano's out to at least December, if not the season. And now we don't know about Taron, but he's obviously ruled out already. Probably a good chance he's going to miss multiple games. And I don't want to speculate too much, but I would say that's close to a safe assumption. 2 all-pro defenders gone before you get to week 2 with a really tough schedule coming up. So I'm with you there. The injuries are concerning. Kind of to that point, as heavy as the burden as Josh Allen already has to carry on this football team, you got to be concerned. Is that too much? Is the dam going to break at some point if the defense can't make any stops? Are you going to be able to win 40-35 every week? Because that sure feels like that's what's going to be the case right now, doesn't it?
It certainly felt that way in week 1. After the Cardinals go up, what was it? They kicked the field goal on the second drive, right? So it was 10-3 or 10-0, and then the Bills came down and kicked the field goal. I'm like, this could get really out of hand really quick or whatever it was. Yeah. And then it was 17-3, and the Bills did the double dip to even it out by the end of the middle of the third quarter or whatever it was. But it felt like that game could have really gotten away from them. And I don't like saying they played perfect because they certainly didn't play perfect, but they needed to play, nearly flawless football for a good chunk of that game to beat the Cardinals. And the Cardinals ain't the Dolphins. And so I think they're going to need to we'll talk about Miami in a second, but that was my other concern coming out of the game is they had to play perfect because they put themselves in a hole. And then Josh, I think when you watch tape from this game, Josh needs to take a few more of the easy wins. They keep using the everybody eats thing. So I'm going to pivot and say sometimes a few sips are just as good as taking one big gulp. And so if you can find that Dalton Kincaid 6-yard pass a couple times, maybe you don't need to do the 12-yard harder pass to whoever it is, Khalil Shakir,
right.
Claypool, whatever. But finding some of those easier underneath things and just going for it, pulling the trigger and going for it. That was another concern for me. I don't want Josh Allen to have to be jumping over people every game. He doesn't either. He knows this.
He's not going to last 17 games doing that. I can tell you that. As tough as he is, he's not going to last 17 games if he's got to do that. To your point with the passing game, I would add one thing too, though, that concerns me a little bit. Last year, one of the weaknesses that Josh Allen had or flaws in his game was just the deep ball. The accuracy really wasn't there. And they only took one deep shot on Sunday, and it was the MBS who did get behind his guy, and it could have been a big play or a touchdown, and Josh missed him. You're going to have to hit that. And I agree with you, maybe more 6-yard passes, less 12 to 15-yard intermediate passes, but you got to be able to go over the top as well, because if you don't, and teams aren't worried about that, it's not Josh's arm, obviously, but if you're not worried about the receivers getting behind you and stuff, you're just going to start bringing more and more guys up, and it's going to be harder and harder to control the intermediate and shorter parts of the field, because the defense is not going to have that threat that, oh shit, MVS or Coleman or somebody's getting behind me and it's going to be a long touchdown. That's a little concerning.
I wonder if it would have been a little bit different if, like, Tua throwing, in pristine conditions down in Florida, hit two of those deep balls. And I know the only reason he's on my mind is because we're about to talk about him, but like he hit those two deep balls where in Buffalo, he was going with the wind at his back. He overthrew him by a couple of yards. And so maybe like we go back to that Mother Nature point, maybe, but yes, obviously we need that in the offense at some point. Josh has shown that he can throw those, but not necessarily like, the highest accuracy. Not that we would expect a quarterback to be able to throw those with the highest accuracy, but we saw it like in the playoff game, the one that went through Stephon Diggs' hands that keeps getting played over and over again. That was right where it was supposed to be. We've seen him throw to Gabe Davis right where it's supposed to be, say in like that Pittsburgh game where they had the 98, 99-yard pass. Like he can drop it in the bucket if he gets enough opportunities and maybe there's not swirling wind at Orchard Park. But they have to play the Orchard Park swirling wind all the rest of the season. So like, that's a thing that has to happen too.
All right, I am here with Matt Warren from SB Nation, not just Buffalo Rumblings, man. Selling my guys short there in the intro at the beginning. Let's talk Miami real quick. All right, so look, they really eked out a 20-17 win week 1 at home against the Jaguars. A lot of stuff that happened before the game, I'm sure, with Tyreek Hill and Campbell, and maybe that had a little bit of an effect on them early, at least anyway. They were down 17-7. They were about to get put away. And then at the goal line, Travis Etienne gets the ball knocked out by Javon Holland. Great play. Kind of saved the day. Miami came back from there. Tua put up September numbers. It's what he does. 27-38, 338 yards. Only one touchdown, though, but typical Miami stuff here. Tyreek Hill, 7 catches for $130 and a touchdown. Jalen Waddle, 5 catches for $109. They can throw the football, especially when the conditions are good. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, though, the Bills have injury reports, and I'm just kind of learning about some of this, too. Miami's got a pair. I knew Devon Achane got hurt, and he was a little bit shaky. And I saw a report from Miami beat reporter Joe Shade, who said they don't know anything about him yet, and also Raheem Mostert. So I did not know that potentially both the running backs could be in danger of not playing Thursday. But if they do, or even if they don't, this team's just got speed for days. Let's kind of talk about them being dangerous, especially early in the year when weather's not going to be a factor. It's a night game, so it's not going to be, well, I shouldn't say not, because you never know in Miami, but it's probably not going to be 80, 85 degrees at nighttime, and the sun won't be out at least anyway. But a dangerous team, dude, for a defense that's the Bills defense that's down some guys and had question marks before that.
Yeah, they can score on every play, obviously. And if you take, like, Tua was not very efficient in that game. Like, 23 of 37 is 62%. But, like, they had those 2 deep shots that went, one was, 80 and 63. Yeah. And so you take those plays out and, like, the numbers are very, like, pedestrian. But that's what their offense is built on, is hitting, 2 or 3 or 4 of those every game. And if they hit all of them, then they rout the Broncos and score 70 points, So it's like, if they can get going, they can definitely beat this Bills secondary, which is why, I think the real big key for this game is going to be getting pressure with that front four. And that's what the Bills have been able to do over the years against Tua and the Dolphins. That's like why when Matt Milano gets right in his face and knocks him over, he has to leave the game. That's why, he gets, I already alluded to it earlier, like when AJ Epinesa, gets that pass rush and lands on him and, knocks him from the game. Like, they've been able to get him off his spot and make him feel uncomfortable. And that's really where they have to go. Again, they can't let those long developing deep routes develop. Now, if Tyreek Hill beats you off the line and it's 1, 2, 3, hit your back foot and like bomb it out, like there's not a whole lot you can do. But some of those were like, Waddle had to go all the way across the field to catch that ball that went for 63 yards. Like, the Bills defense needs to be in his face before he can throw that pass.
Sure. Look, and I'm not completely sold on Miami, and it's not me being a Bills homer and a Miami hater. I'm being objective here. I think their offensive line, I will generously say that I think it's suspect. Tua was sacked 3 times, by the way, against the Jags. Obviously, Wilkins. Wilkins is a guy who's had at least some impactful games against the Bills. He's a top-tier defensive tackle. Say what you will about him. He's no longer there. Bradley Chubb's on PUP, so he's not going to be playing in this game. They got some older players on defense too. Look, old friend Jordan Poyer. I feel like Josh Allen. That's going to be fun, by the way. Sidebar, ain't it? Jordan Poyer. How are we going to feel about that? Like,
there's going to be some chatter. There's going to be some chatter. Just say it.
I personally, I like Jordan Poyer every bit as much, just about as I like Trey White. So I'm rooting for Trey White. As much as I hate Miami, I'm not rooting so much against Poyer, but there's going to be some shit talking if he makes a play. Ugh. But also, his speed. Look, he's a liability. In all seriousness, his speed is a liability out there. And I think the Bills know that, and they'll find a way. The Bills aren't the only ones with holes in their defense, is what I'm getting at here. Miami has some as well.
With how expensive that Dolphins secondary is, like Josh has carved them up, like absolutely, like dismantled them, including like a younger, healthier, like Jalen Ramsey, like including like healthier versions and younger versions of these players. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all. Like I keep saying, like the over is going to be high, and I'm still probably going to bet the over.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a bad idea. Isn't it crazy, by the way, how much Miami's got invested in just such few players? The quarterback, 2 receivers, and Jalen Ramsey. I could not believe. Look, Tua was in the right place, right time. Kind of like Spencer Brown in a way. Yeah. He got paid. Your receivers, I completely understand that logic. You're 2 of the best receivers in the game. And but Jalen Ramsey being the highest paid corner, to me, that was weird. And not to mention guys like Bradley Chubb. Jalen Phillips is going to be getting a monster contract sooner than later. Miami's legit, like, kind of, I feel like if they're not, they better be in win now mode. You know what I mean? Because they're going to be having a rebuild or a reset like the Bills of their own coming up.
Yeah, it ended up costing them Wilkins too. Like that's why they couldn't keep him. And so, they're going the opposite of the Chiefs and the Bills. They're investing heavily in those wide receivers. Frankly, it's because, in my opinion, Tua is like not just 1 tier below Mahomes and Allen. He's like 2 or 3 tiers below Mahomes and Allen. And so when you have those like generational quarterbacks, we saw it in week 1. Like who was the leading receiver for the Bills? It was Keon Coleman, but like his numbers were like pedestrian when you compare him to say Stephon Diggs last year,
sure.
At least in the first half of the year, or like over the course of his entire Bills career. Like it wasn't one person being targeted, or in the Dolphins case, 2 people that they're so heavily reliant on. And so like you're able to spread out the money at some other positions like the Bills have been able to do, like the Chiefs have been able to do.
Look, so when we get into this game here, it's weird because on one hand, I feel, look, Miami's at home. They know they got to beat the Bills. The division goes through the Bills, and they know that. It's early in the season where Miami typically plays better. They're at home. It's a primetime game, and the Bills are banged up pretty severely, especially on defense, obviously, here. Like, advantage Miami when it comes to all that. They're hungry. They got to win. They know if they lose to Buffalo this week on a short week at home, I feel like the alarms are going to be going off really, really early in Miami, right? So advantage Miami there for sure. And they're a talented football team. You cannot take that away from them. But let's look at it the other way. At the end of the day, it's not hyperbole, man. Josh Allen literally owns the Miami Dolphins. He's been the AFC Player of the Week 5 times out of 12 times they played him. He's like 10-2 against the Dolphins. I mean, those numbers are eye-popping. 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 110 passer rating for his career against Miami. And one of those 2 losses, of course, was in the sweltering heat where they still should have and could have won that game at the very end.
Yep. And
So
the other
it's
one
like,
was the Charles Clay drop on the goal line.
yeah. God, man. So, like, what are we thinking right now? It's like advantage Miami in a way, but they're playing a team. And by the way, Sean McDermott, as great as Hill and Waddle are, and the Bills have safety issues, which scares the shit out of me, especially this game against Miami. I feel like Sean McDermott and now Bobby Babich as well. They're really good at finding a way to limit some of those big plays that Miami usually gets against other teams.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see more of that. The dime look that the Bills were using against the Cardinals, where they would bring in, I guess it was Ingram instead of Dorian Williams. They won't have to spy Tua in the same way that they tried to spy Kyler Murray. And so, the biggest threat would be like to clog those passing lanes, to hopefully allow the pass rush some time to get to Tagovailoa. And so if they can do that, like, I think that's like their recipe for success. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see even more of the dime this week, even though you're talking about a guy like Evans, who's like an undrafted guy, young guy coming in to replace Dorian Williams, who's been in the defense for, a little bit longer and like supposedly has a higher pedigree and all this other stuff.
Yeah, you're going to look, if you're the Bills, you're like, run the ball. Go ahead, run the football. We're not letting you get behind us. I will make a prediction. It's not a bold prediction, I don't think, by any means, but against Arizona, Rousseau Douglas and Christian Benford were targeted 3 times, 2 catches, 4 yards. I am going to go on a limb and say that they are going to be targeted more than 3 times when Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are lined up on the other side of the field. Like, Tua is going to test them. I'm relatively confident in that. I want to get a prediction out of you as well here, because again, this is going to be airing on Wednesday, so it'll be a day before the game. And you have the right to change your mind. You go on Rumblings or whatever, or another show, whatever you want to do. You can change your mind, but I'm going to get a prediction from you for this episode. And I got one, and there's a spoiler alert and a warning. Might not be that popular, but before we get to that, like, what is your I might change my mind in the next 3 minutes, so scratch that. What's your X? Do you have like an X factor? Is there something maybe a little bit underlying that we're not talking about enough that might play a bigger role in this game besides just the obvious Josh owns Miami and Miami's got dangerous receivers?
Well, I think on offense, what Sean McDermott said after the game was he wanted to get Khalil Shakir more touches and he wanted to get Dalton Kincaid more touches. And so when he comes out and says that, like, we've seen that in the past where he, for better or worse, bullies his offensive coordinator in the media. Like, we've seen that happen. And so I would expect both of those guys, like Kincaid's snap counts were really high in the second half. I know Joe Biscaglia talked about that in his podcast. I think he was at like 93% of the second half snaps.
Yeah.
And then when you watch him on the tape, he was open all the time. And so when they go back and rewatch that film, they're going to see Kincaid was creating mismatches. So I would expect that that's going to be like a factor this week. And then for Shakir, his snap counts were low. He was third in wide receiver snap counts behind Mac Hollins. So we did not expect that out of the return of the Mac. And so seeing Shakir get more of those snaps in and Kincaid getting more targets, I think is kind of where I'm leaning for this week 2 game after what happened in week 1. And on defense, I already said, I think they're going to go for more of that dime look, whether it's Ingram or somebody else. I don't know if they have anybody else, frankly, right now because of the way that their defensive injuries have been going. But Dorian Williams, I don't know how much he's going to add to what they can do on defense this week based on, the kind of stuff and the kind of speed that the Dolphins are going to bring to the table.
Yeah. I'm gonna stop short of a prediction because I do a show tomorrow as well, Thursday, so I'll have like a preview and a prediction there. What I was gonna say, which kind of might lead to where I'm leaning right now, but again, not final. The Bills have an NFL record. They have not lost by more than 6 points in an NFL record 42 games.
Oh boy.
I feel like that could be in some jeopardy. What I think you're going to see from the Bills, and I can say this now, is might not be the most juiciest, exciting thing in the world for Bills fans, but I think they are going to make, again, a concerted effort to run the football and control the clock, even though they didn't do it in the first half successfully because the defense couldn't get off the field against Arizona. But I saw a crazy stat. The Bills ran the ball 75% of the time on first down on Sunday. You might see something similar to that if Miami is not going to, if they're so scared of Josh is going to carve them apart and they don't want Josh Allen to be the AFC Player of the Week for a sixth time against them, they're going to let the Bills run the football. Kind of like when the Bills played the Chiefs all those years back in Buffalo where they dared the Chiefs to run the ball on Monday Night Football, and they did. I think you might see a similar situation where Miami just dares the Bills to keep running the football, and I think Sean McDermott and Joe Brady will be more than happy to comply. So I feel like James Cook could be a big X factor in this game. All right.
I like that take. I do. I very much like that take. It would go against me taking the over, but whatever. Like it's usually to your point, like it's usually other teams that are trying to shorten the game against the Bills. And,
right.
With Buffalo's defense, I mean, you might want to do that. You might want to take the ball out of, I won't say to his hands, the Dolphins' hands.
Yeah. I just thought of that take in my head too in real time. It's not like I even pre-thought about it. I'm like, hold on, I think they're going to let the Bills run the football. Anyway, all right, let me get a prediction from you. Again, I'm going to abstain from mine until tomorrow's show, but I'm going to give us the Matt Warren official prediction, sure. At least the official prediction for talking Buffalo anyway.
Right. I was thinking somewhere along the lines of like 38-35. I'm still not 100% sure which team's going to go 38 or 35, but I tend to always pick the Bills just out of habit. And so I'll go 38-35 Bills. It won't be a last second Tyler Bass field goal that wins the game. It'll be, a 2-minute drive from the offense. Maybe that is eating up clock, or maybe it's to take that go ahead score. But I do think it's going to be down to the wire. Just because, like you said, like that's just how the Bills have proven to be, whether it's like scoring that late touchdown to bring it to a 1-score game, or it's, getting all the way down the field and then like losing it on fourth down, or as we've seen over and over again, them scoring with less than a minute left. Like, I mean, Josh Allen's so efficient in the last 2 minutes of games and overtime. It's people think that he's a choker because the Bills have lost those overtime games, but he's been incredible against the Eagles. He was incredible against the Chiefs multiple times in the last couple minutes. I'll go 38-35 Bills on something that weird happens in the last couple minutes.
Okay. And I'll say one last thing too about when you go to Miami and you play when you're the Bills, it can't be understated the Buffalo fans that are in that stadium. I mean, it's still more Miami fans than Buffalo. I'm not going to be that naive. I've been in that stadium for a couple of those games, but It ain't nothing like when you're you're trying to go into Kansas City or Pittsburgh or Cincinnati and pull a game out in the end where the crowd noise is going to be insane against the Bills. I don't think you see that much. And that could end up being a little bit of a factor, especially if the game gets late as well. Before I get you out of here,
it's not going to be like the big Buffalo road trip like it normally is either. It's a Thursday night in September. Like maybe there's folks that want to make it like a 4-day weekend in Miami, but like it's still hot and humid as heck down there right now. And like it's not a time where I want to visit Miami personally. And so like, in those December games, folks make a whole thing out of it. And I just don't know if they're going to do the exact same thing for
I agree with you, but I will say not as many, but there's plenty of Bills fans that ain't got to make no road trip to get to Miami. I'm talking a couple hours. They literally are scattered all over Florida. Real quick, before I let you get out of here, a couple around the league things that I wanted to touch on at least real quick. 3 things in particular. Number 1, the Jets on Monday night. Okay, so they got smacked against San Francisco, and I see a lot of people, Bills fans, understandably so. I get it. Trust me. But a lot of people took joy in that. And a lot of people are already talking about the Jets being toast and frauds and this and that. I've had questions about the Jets going into the season. Aaron Rodgers coming off a major injury and he's old. And I think you kind of saw a little bit of that on Monday. You gave him time to throw. Man, he still throws a pretty football as good as anyone in the league. But you get any pressure on him, he's got to move. He's washed when it comes to that.
Yep.
Questions on the offensive line, and they were destroyed on Monday night. But at the end of the day, they did play arguably the best roster in the NFL on the road in prime time, even without Christian McCaffrey. That team is still nasty loaded. So they got smacked like I think most people would have expected. I looked at their schedule, cake the next 4 games. Not cake. Well, there's no cake in the NFL, but at Tennessee, Patriots at home, Denver at home, at Minnesota. It's incredibly feasible that when the Bills go to New York for week 6, New Jersey week 6, Jets could be 4-1. So it could be a completely different tone. But anyway, quickly here, when it comes to the Jets, what you saw Monday, if you're a Jets fan, at least, let's go from that perspective. Are you like, all right, man, look, they just lost to a hell of a football team? Or are you like, you know what? We got some real issues with our football team.
I think it's mostly the first part, like that, Aaron Rodgers didn't play in the preseason, hasn't played a game in, almost 2 calendar years, like, I think that's part of it. And even that year before that, he wasn't great. They just need him to be mediocre. Like last night, his stats were eerily similar to Zach Wilson's against the Bills in week 1 the year before. Like, he played Zach Wilson football last night. That was how good he was. And so they just need him to be incrementally better than that guy. And I think he can do that when he like sort of gets settled in. It just hasn't played a lot. Like, I don't know why they didn't put him out there in the preseason at all when he hadn't played in, over a year. So like, that's, I think, questionable to me. If you look across the NFL, passing stats are down all over the NFL as teams are transitioning more to like the power running game and different types of running games, taking the ball out of the quarterback's hands, especially with the like rookie quarterbacks and the young guys that are out there right now. You saw just more ground and pound as opposed to chucking it all over the place. So that's, I think, a narrative around the league that like the Jets might want to lean into as well. Like, they still got a really talented defense. We saw that against the Bills twice last year when like they just gave Josh Allen fits, and they've done that year after year after year, really. So I'm not counting them out at this point. Again, they did play one of the best teams in the NFL last night. And so hopefully the Bills can also be one of the best teams in the NFL and do that to them in week 6. But I mean, I think the Jets are going to be there. They're not playing, they're playing a difficult schedule just because of the teams that all the AFC East teams are playing, but they're playing a third place schedule, not a first or second place schedule. So there's like a couple games on there, like you said, that are going to be a little bit more cake than what the Bills are seeing.
Last two teams that I want to hit on real quick here. They're both AFC teams, and they're both teams that could, the Bills could be in direct competition with them if it comes down to maybe a wild card spot at the end of the year. The surprise of the week, for me at least anyway, in week 1 that I just totally did not see coming. Cincinnati loses at home to the Jacoby Brissett quarterbacked New England Patriots. Now, if you would have told me last week the Patriots are going to go in there and upset them, I would have been like, wow, May must have got the start or came in the game and they weren't ready for him and he did some magical ass rookie stuff that you would not see coming. But no, they got beat, man. And they look like shit. The offense looked terrible. I know, no T. Higgins. I know Jamar Chase is not playing because of the contract stuff. Lots of things. Joe Burrow coming back from an injury. Is that just is that a blemish? Does it feel like a blemish to you, or does this feel like this could be a team where it could be that kind of year between the injuries, the holdouts, and other things? Joe Burrow's hair, I don't know, you name it. What's going on with the Bengals? Should they be worried?
I was going to say that they should dye his hair back just to get the mojo and grow it back out.
Man, what's he doing?
Going back to the Austin Powers movies, dates me. But no, they've traditionally started slow and then turned it on. Kind of like the opposite of the Dolphins, who start fast and then like fade down the stretch. Yeah. So, I mean, they've got plenty of time to get it back together. Joe Burrow didn't really get training camp last year. And then missed a bunch of time during the season as well with a different injury. And so like they'll figure it out. I think they're just too talented not to figure it out. But yeah, they definitely have started slow in the past. And that Jacoby Brissett, man, he's that wily veteran. It was one of my favorite quotes from the entire weekend was the Patriots head coach Gerard Mayo saying he's probably the slowest black quarterback in the league, and just like completely ribbing him for what he was doing. But he was making really good decisions out there. And that's ultimately why they're starting him over Drake May at the beginning of the year, because the Patriots offensive line is, one of the worst in the NFL. And so he can make those decisions to put the rest of the team in a good place. They're not going to win, a ton of games, but they're going to be competitive with Brissett as opposed to Drake May. And, they had some timely plays on defense that really helped them. Week 1, man, it can be weird sometimes, small sample sizes.
Last point here. All right. So look, I look at the Cleveland Browns. Okay. And I'm like, this roster is so good. And they did do is just now their talented tight end, and he might be out for a while. So that sucks for them. Major injury there. That aside, though, man, that defense is still stacked.
Mm-hmm.
And they got Cooper, they got Jerry Jeudy, Nick Chubb's getting back into form. They got a pretty good line. But that quarterback is as bad as it gets. I saw some comments on Twitter, which actually I got to admit, sometimes you got to take sarcasm, just laugh at it, even if it's not accurate. It's just funny. And some people are like, he is a worse quarterback than human being. Talk about Deshaun Watson, of course. And I actually found that funny, man, to call him a worse quarterback than a human being. But I watched that game. I watched almost that entire game. And I'm telling you, I don't know that it's possible for a quarterback to play worse than what I saw from Deshaun Watson. He was horrifically bad. This is a guy who a couple years ago was as good, every bit as good as Josh Allen. Okay. Mm-hmm. And look what's happened to him now. And obviously all the stuff that's happened off the field, I'm sure that's had an effect on his game. This dude just seems cooked. I guess the question I'm asking you is, I don't care how much you're paying him because you're stuck. It's the worst contract, the worst trade in the history of football, if not all sports, ever. But you're stuck with him now. Do you just eat that money and make this guy inactive or on the bench and go with Jameis Winston? They were better off with Joe Flacco last year. I mean, he's so bad. It's insane to think about. But on the field, I'm not even talking about off the field. On the field, he's so bad. No. If you're Cleveland, are you like screaming right now? If you're a fan, are you calling in the radio shows saying, I need Jameis Winston to start? Put this guy in his $90 million contract, whatever he's making this year. Put him on the bench because this is too good of a football team. They're probably going to go 5-11 this year, 5-12 this year if Deshaun Watson starts 17 games. That's how freaking bad he is. What are you doing if you're Cleveland?
I mean, if I'm Cleveland, I'm calmer than like sports radio caller people. So I'm going to ride out Watson as long as I possibly can, because like you said, they can't move on from him. So they're paying him either way. They want to get some sort of return on their investment. At the same time, eventually they'll have to move on if he keeps playing like this. And so he's obviously had several weird years and off seasons over the last several years. I don't know. You're definitely right. And it's the worst. It's the worst contract in the NFL by far. It was when he signed it. It was, I thought the trade was steep when they made it. They kind of sold their soul. And I don't necessarily believe in like religious karma, but I certainly believe that, that things like that could happen. And it's happening to both the Browns and Deshaun Watson right now. They do not have answers. Over at Dogs by Nature, our Cleveland Browns site, they're looking at like week 4, week 5 for that, like to even be a conversation. But the fact that everyone's talking about it so early when he has, at least $100 million left on his deal is problematic, to say the least.
Let's say this is we'll have with this conversation today. I'll say this. I like Cleveland fans. They very much remind me of Buffalo fans. Like I've always felt like if the Bills can't win a bowl, Cleveland or Detroit, those are fans that deserve the championship. Those gritty ass cities, the teams that don't win anything. I'd love to see that. But they knew what they were doing when they traded for Deshaun Watson. Okay. So I have very little sympathy for them. I'm sure the mindset was, you know what, we'll deal with the backlash, but this guy, again, he's on the same level as Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. He's going to win us a championship. And some people will always be, we hate the move, we hate the player, but most fans will just be like, whatever, off the field, I don't care. I just want to win. That's what the thinking was. And because of that, it's just hard for me to feel any sympathy at all towards them. By the way, you're like the yin to my yang. What is it with you rumbling guys? Because you guys are like the common influence on me all the time. You said you're not that radio talk show guy or caller.
Sorry.
I am. You're not. Anthony Marino's not Anthony Marino, another one from Rumblings. Originally, he was, a nice common influence on me. Bruce Nolan always kind of could chill me out a little bit when I get going. And now apparently Matt Moran is able to do the same. Kind of save me from my tangent being little bit
especially when you're talking about sample sizes. That's why everyone overreacts to week 1 and then like stuff evens out. Like you remember the game against the Jaguars a few years ago where the Bills lost, even though like it was the why can't I remember his name? The coach, whatever.
Moran?
No, the really crappy
Peters?
one that only left the other. Why can't
I don't remember. What am I drawing a
the
blank?
the college the college coach?
Peterson?
It was no the man.
Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer.
Yeah, people are gonna murder me for that. Sorry, I don't watch college football, guys. My bad. Like, Urban Meyer comes in, he wins like what 1 or 2 games as a coach, and one of them is over the Buffalo Bills out a year that was the year they of 19 seconds. Like that was the year they won. Like they should have won the Super Bowl, but they lost to the Jaguars in that game. Like if you take just that one game as a sample size, like you would think that team was terrible. But when you look at their season as a whole, like obviously the Bills were not terrible that season. And so that's why like just looking at one game, whether it's week 1 or week whatever that was, I think it was in November, like that's why we go with sample size. That's why we go with metadata and look at like the whole rather than the individual.
Funny, quick anecdote with that Jacksonville game, actually. Buffalo Rumblings, Resurgence Brewery. You were there that night. I physically met you that night. Joe Miller did a podcast, him and Jay Spence. They had it was the Jacksonville game, and myself and Nate Gary were guests on Joe Miller's show, and we were previewing the game, and nobody even gave Jacksonville, like it wasn't even a discussion. Like we didn't even do predictions. It was so obvious that the Bills were going to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars that we barely even previewed the game. We talked about the rest of the season, big picture stuff, didn't even pay Jacksonville any mind at all. And then of course the Bills did lose that game. Such an embarrassing game.
It happens sometimes, just it happens. And I think for whatever reason they were matching up poorly. I think it's the Josh Allen thing. Like it's like how like kryptonite like can sap Superman. So like the Josh Allen can steal the Josh Allen from the other Josh Allen. Maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's gonna be man. It's gonna be a fun game on Thursday. A short week, so we'll see. Thursday games tend to be a little sloppier, but these are two really explosive quarterbacks. Tua is explosive because it is September, so I would expect something big out of him as well. Thank you very much, Matt Warren. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at MattRichWarren, SB Nation. Of course, Buffalo Rumblings, one of my favorites, man. I appreciate you very, very much, Matt.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
All right, guys, and I will be back again. A Bills-Dolphins preview. I'm going to have a guest. I don't even know who the hell it's going to be, but someone will be with me on tomorrow's show. Talk to you then.